The constraints that limit evolution are just as important to understanding organisms as the mechanisms of evolution. Although organisms are often exquisitely adapted to their environment, adaptation is far from perfect. Vestigial traits such as the human coccyx or tailbone and goosebumps do not increase the fitness of individuals with those traits. These structures are not adaptive. They exist because they were present in the ancestral population. Vestigial traits are not the only types of structures with no or reduced function. Some adult traits exist as holdovers from structures that appear early in development. For example, human males have nipples despite the absence of mammary glands. Nipples exist in men because they form in the human embryo before sex hormones begin directing the development of male organs instead of female organs. One of the best examples of non-adaptive traits involves evolutionary changes in DNA sequences. Due to the redundancy of the genetic code, a mutation may change a base in the third position of a codon without changing the amino acid sequence of the protein encoded by that gene. This is called a silent mutation. Silent changes in DNA sequences are extremely common. Since they don't change the phenotype, they can't be acted on by natural selection and are not adaptive. The Grants team found another interesting observation when they analyzed data on the 1977 drought in the Galapagos. Although individuals with deep beaks survive better than individuals with shallow beaks, birds with particularly narrow beaks survive better than individuals with wider beaks. This observation made sense because finches crack tribulus fruits by twisting them. Narrow beaks concentrate the twisting force more efficiently than wider beaks, so they are especially useful for cracking the fruits. But narrower beaks did not evolve in the population. The biologist noted that parents with deep beaks tend to have offspring with beaks that are both wide and deep. This is a common pattern across most forms of life. Many alleles that affect body size have an effect on all aspects of size, not just one structure or dimension. As a result, selection for increased beak depth overrode selection for narrow beaks, even though a deep and narrow beak would have been more advantageous. The general point here is that selection was not able to optimize all aspects of a trait due to genetic correlation. Genetic correlations occur because of pleiotropy, in which a single allele affects multiple traits. In this case, selection on alleles for one trait, the increased beak depth, caused a correlated, though suboptimal, increase in another trait, the beak width. Genetic correlations are not the only genetic constraint on adaptation. Lack of genetic variation is also important. Consider that salamanders have the ability to regrow severed limbs. Some eels and sharks can sense electric fields. Birds can see ultraviolet light. Even though these traits would possibly confer increased reproductive success in humans, they do not exist because humans lack the requisite genes. It was possible for these traits to evolve in some organisms, but in others, a few mutations is not enough to produce these phenotypes. It would require an enormous number of interacting mutations for humans to develop functioning tentacles. Some aquatic invertebrates were able to develop tentacles because they had pre-existing genes correlating with tentacles, and because selection pressures favored individuals who had the mutations that gradually led to tentacles. In nature, selection occurs in the context of fitness trade-offs. A fitness trade-off is a compromise between traits in terms of how those traits perform in the environment. Because selection acts on many traits at once, every adaptation is a compromise. During the drought in the Galapagos medium ground finches, with large bodies that could chase off smaller birds from seeds, but individuals with large bodies require large amounts of food to maintain their mass, and they also tend to be slower and less nimble than smaller individuals. When food is scarce, large individuals are more prone to starvation. Even if large size is advantageous in an environment, there is always counteracting selection that prevents individuals from getting even bigger. Biologists have documented trade-offs between the size of eggs or seeds that an individual makes and the number of offspring it can produce, also between rapid growth and long lifespan, and between bright coloration and tendency to attract predators. In addition to being constrained by genetic correlations, lack of genetic variation, and fitness trade-offs, Adaptations are constrained by history. All traits have evolved from previously existing traits. Natural selection acts on structures that originally had a very different function. For example, the incus malleus and stapes bones found in your middle ear evolved from bones that made up part of the jaw in the ancestors of mammals. These bones now function in transmitting and amplifying sound from outer ear to your inner ear. Biologists routinely interpret these bones as adaptations that improve your ability to hear airborne sounds. But they are not a perfect solution to the problem of transmitting sound from the outside of the ear to the inside. They are the best solution possible given an important historical constraint. Some other vertebrates have different structures for this purpose and can therefore achieve sound transmission more efficiently. So not all traits are adaptive, and even adaptive traits are constrained by genetic and historical facts.